welcome to this episode of the Wagging Tales Podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of puppy training. Now, this episode is not going to be us going through exactly how to train a puppy, because that would not be very useful to anyone. Because when you're training a puppy, you do need visuals. We would need to have a puppy here, we need to be showing you, and it would take a while. Now, I do notice on the live, the moment I said we're not showing you how to train a puppy, a couple of people dropped off on the live. Now that's fine, but the reality of the situation is that you cannot train a puppy just from listening to a podcast. But by understanding why it is so important to do training with your puppy can be the difference between having a well-adjusted, safe adult dog and having a dog that you continuously struggle with. So with that said, one of the things that every dog trainer goes through when they're doing any of their certifications is the puppy segments of the courses, because if you don't understand how to train a puppy, if you don't understand the importance of training a puppy, everything else that you try to do isn't really going to have the foundation that you need to really be successful with your dog. So in this, we will be looking at why it's important. We're going to be looking at the developmental phases of dogs when they are born and through their puppyhood into adulthood. We're going to be looking at what the impacts of these developmental stages are and what we can do to ensure that we are giving our dogs the best for it. We're going to be looking at the safety reasons for doing training, let alone puppy training. And we're going to be looking at the quality of life. Now, that's the one that a lot of people neglect when it comes to training. They think that training is just about getting your dog to do things, but they don't realize that by not training your dog properly, you're actually reducing the quality of life of your dog, because it means that you don't have the communication and the bond that you could have with your dog. We're then going to be looking at appropriate socialization and about group puppy classes and how that helps with everything else that we've mentioned. Now, with this topic being what it is, I encourage strongly for anyone that's listening to ask questions on this. And even if you're watching this as a saved video or on a saved podcast that's been published on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else, if you have any questions about anything that we're talking about here, jump onto the Wagging Tales Podcast Facebook group or the Noble Canine Facebook group and ask them in there. And we will be more than happy to either answer them directly or maybe answer them during our next episode of the podcast. So, Jay, without further ado, could you please explain why puppy training is so important?
Yep, of course. So basically, whenever someone gets a puppy for the first time, I know they're very cute, they're very lovable. You want to just keep playing with them, shower them with gifts and stuff like that. And then a lot of people only do the bare minimum when it comes to training, unless they actually research a lot about the breed and then they target a specific breed, like, oh, I want a border collie. And then if you read the research notes on a border collie, it's like, oh, it's the smartest dog. It requires a lot of training. Most of the time, I would say no one is ever prepared for what's coming. So here are a few things that you should take note of. So the first one is that we always tell everyone to do training from when you have a puppy. It's because you start building that bond with your dog. So the training helps create this bond between you and your puppy. So the bond is built on trust and communication. Without these two things, your dog is just there. It doesn't really, you don't really have that relationship with your dog unless you start training. And For those of you who have older dogs and you didn't start training when they're a puppy, don't worry, you still can do it. You can, it's never too late to start. You don't have to worry about, oh, my dog's too old or stuff like that. Fraser and myself, we have clients who come to us for the first time when they're like 10, 12, 15 years old. And they're going through different phases of life, but don't worry about that. So the first one, strong bond. Remember that without the bond, without laying the foundation, training is just not as easy. So once you have that strong bond, your dog trusts you, it's a lot easier to build on top of that rather than just jumping into things that you want to do. Second is, of course, the essential skills that puppies need to learn. Everyone teaches their dog sit. That's like the baseline of everything else. But there are things that are so much more important. So just because your dog can do sit, next thing you have to look at is things like recall, things like stay, things like walking on a leash. So a puppy's first few walks is usually very overstimulating for them. They get very excited. There's so many new sights, sounds, and smells for them to see. You have to teach them how to walk on a leash. That is also one very important skill for them to learn. All these are essential skills that if your puppies don't learn at a young age, they start to pull on the leash, and then they feel like, oh, you know what, walks are just like this. I need to always pull on a leash during a walk. I have to always be at 110% excitement during a walk. So start young, start early, and then it becomes a lot more manageable. Next is when they're a puppy and they're developing, their brain is developing, you can prevent a lot of behavioral issues by starting your puppy training young and early. So things like aggression, barking, chewing, all of these usually start when you ignore training when you're supposed to start training. If your puppy starts chewing on things, they start barking at things, if you have that bond, which I mentioned earlier, it's a lot easier to be able to redirect them and then teach them what's the right thing to do instead. So of course, don't punish them for it. You use positive reinforcement and you redirect them and show them what's the right thing to do. A lot of people with dogs, they always feel like, I need to teach my dog what no is. But telling your dog no is not teaching them anything. You need to teach them what's the right thing to do. So if your dog's barking at the door because your dog heard something outside, instead of just going to your dog and say, no, stop. Teach them what's the right thing to do. So if they hear a sound, they should just come and look for you. That's a lot easier. And dogs will pick up on that because you're showing them what's the right thing to do. And last but not least, it's communication. Puppy training enhances your communication skills with your dog. So your ability to communicate with your puppy is improved tenfold if you start training your puppy when they're young. Apart from going through life stages with them, you start to, of course, you learn more about their personality. You start to know more about what your dog likes, what's their highest form of reward, the second, the third, whatever. Your everyday interactions become a lot more smoother and become more enjoyable because through training, you learn to communicate better with your puppy and your dog. Like now, when I walk Blue and Ori, I don't actually need to tell them anything. I don't need to tell them walk, stop, slow, or go, or turn left, turn right. Communication isn't just verbal. Body language and how you hold the leash, things like that are also considered communication skills between you and your dog. So if you have good communication with your dog, they become very highly responsive to you, and it's a lot safer. It's a lot more safer for you and your dog, especially on things like walks and all that.
So, with all of that said, that's why it's important. But what I'm going to talk about a little bit here is the puppy development phases. Now, don't worry, we're not going to go so deep into this that it gets boring, but a lot of people find it fairly interesting. So, what I would quite like to do is, once as I'm talking about this, maybe Jay could pull up the image of the puppy development graph and send it into the comments. If you can't find it, don't worry, I can do that a little bit later as well. But the neonatal period, now at this period, there's not much that the owners do at all. This is really the breeders' area right here, because this is between 0 to 2 weeks. This is when the breeders should be focusing on care and early socialization, benefiting from gentle handling and exposure to like mild sensory experiences during this period, and letting the mother do what the mothers do best if they are in fact being nurturing and looking after puppies, because of course in some situations that doesn't happen. Now 0 to 2 weeks, as I say, not that much that an owner or a guardian has got much to do there. Now then you've got the transitional period, which is 2 to 4 weeks. Now this is really the introduction to the environment and the sensory experiences where dogs will get used to what is actually around them. Their eyes start to open, they start to see, hear and smell, and they really start to experience everything. But again, between 2 to 4 weeks, as a dog parent, as a guardian or an owner, you shouldn't really have anything to do with that period unless it's an emergency. Then you've got weeks 4 to 14. Now, this is the socialization period, amongst other things. And that's when you normally will get your puppy, because most people will get their puppy between 8 to 12 weeks old. Now, this is a very, very critical phase of the puppy development, because this is also when they're going to be having their first fear imprint period. This is very, very important that you not only do socialization, but also introduce the training element of it, because that helps build confidence. That helps build your trust. That helps build your bond, as Jay just went into. So you can see how correlating that will have a definite impact on things. Then you've got the juvenile period, 14 weeks to 6 months. You've got to continue that training and socialization throughout this period, because that juvenile period is when they start to push the boundaries to see where they can go. People get very confused here. They say, oh, this is when the dog tries to be dominant and all that. Now, that's all nonsense, right? They're just pushing the boundaries to see what they can do. A dog's not going to try and dominate you at all unless you are a really poor leader. And definitely a juvenile dog's not going to try it, because they know they're young. They're just pushing the limit. Same as a child. You would never say that your toddler is trying to dominate you, so the dog's not trying to do it either. Now, then we get into the more challenging phases where you get this is when a lot of people who haven't done puppy training start to panic. And this is the adolescent period, which is, you can argue that it's 6 months to a year or 6 months to 2 years, depending on the breed and of course the individual dog. Now, this is where you've really got to reinforce the training that you've already done. Make sure that you're on top of that, because this is when you're going to see teenage-like behavior. They're going to just be a little bit naughty for the sake of being naughty. And that's okay. That's very, very normal. But you've got to be on top of things during that period. Now, even as your dog gets into adulthood and you start to see more of the personality, and you might even start to see some changes in that behavior. One of the big changes you get a lot of people seeing is when they reach 2 years, the dogs start to get a little bit reactive if you've not done any proper socialization or training. You hear people saying, oh yeah, wait till 2 years, they start to settle down. That only applies if you've put in the work during the puppy training. And I'm sure you would agree with that, Jay. So,
yeah,
how does this actually impact the developmental phases? Well, it's really, as you heard me going through that, a lot of people have been like, well, with what Jay said, that kind of makes sense anyway. But effectively, a large part of it is actually socialization and confidence. So it actually helps reduce their fears and anxieties during that socialization period, during that fear response period, during their flight response periods. All of this stuff is paramount, that you've got those tools to build their confidence, that you've got your ability to socialize and actually help. Now, one of our clients had a really big part of this, because they assumed they didn't need to do anything because they had a small dog. Dog's name was Daisy, if anybody was interested. It was a small dog, it was a Shih Tzu. And effectively, when they first got the dog, they were like, oh, they're small, it won't matter. We don't need to do training. And when their dog started to get into that juvenile period, the dog started to show a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. And what we ended up having to do there was a lot of counter conditioning and exposure training, so that the dog could be actually socialized, not so much to people, but more to the environment and more to what was going on around them. A lot of dogs are not really used to the world as we see it, especially if you're living in a big city. So having those tools to be able to communicate with your dog is just so important when it comes to that. Now, this next part should be really obvious to a lot of you, and it won't be surprising to any of you that the client, is the example here, has a boxer. So boxers are notoriously boisterous. A lot of them are really loving dogs. They just want to play, they just want to love you. And a lot of them do excessive licking and excessive attention seeking, and that's all fun and games when they're tiny puppies, but when they get a little bit older, that becomes an issue. So with this particular client, Rex, Rex's owners had a boxer before and hadn't put in the work, and they struggled with that social behavior, with those bad manners for the dog's whole life, which I can only imagine would be incredibly challenging with a full-sized boxer. So these guys approached us really quite early on, but I think actually approached us before Rex actually arrived with them. So it meant that they could instill good manners and appropriate social behaviors, so that Rex was actually able to behave appropriately as a young dog and be able to be taught a little bit easier as a smaller dog, before he became an adult boxer. Now, an example of this, when people say, oh, what do you mean appropriate social behavior? Well, when you see a big dog, or like say a boxer or a Labrador or another big dog, run up to other dogs and just jump up all over them, start to play with them very roughly, or even if they come up and they jump up on you and start to lick you and get really overexcited. Now, imagine me or Jay doing that to you. So let's see, who's watching right now? Barry's watching. Okay, Barry, you know me. I'd like to think that you are very fond of me. But you wouldn't feel so great if I just ran up to you in public, pounced on you, put all of my weight on you, and expected you to be happy with that. That's not appropriate behavior. Good manners and social behavior is very, very important, not just for humans, but also for dogs. It can be the difference between a dog being very, very accepted by dogs in a social situation, or ending up actually having a problem. So if a dog doesn't like the way that dog's behaving socially, or even if it's a puppy not behaving socially correctly, that dog could react. Maybe that dog could attack. And what can end up happening is that your dog can actually gain reactivity towards other dogs, because the socialization, the teaching of good manners wasn't done while they were younger or at all. So that is an incredibly important section to remember when we're talking about the impacts of doing training during the developmental periods. And the last one, foundations for lifelong lifelong learning. Well, that's the same as human beings, right? Early training sets the foundations for continuous learning and adaptability. Now, this is not just for dogs. The reason we have our children and we want to teach our children things very early on, and one of the reasons, unpopular point to say, but I am taking this directly from Psychology Today, from academic papers, so it's not as if I'm just talking nonsense here. One of the reasons that children today are able to learn at an advanced rate compared to children of the past is because they are taught things at an earlier age. It's not just because they've got access to a lot more information. Okay, so like when we were much younger, we were sometimes told just to be quiet and listen. You know, don't ask questions, just do what you're told. You know, but now, especially with like I know for the likes of my daughter Freya, we encourage her to ask questions. We say, okay, ask questions. What do you think this is? Give them options, give them autonomy. And that makes such a big difference for her learning. And it's been shown through studies. And if you're interested, you can have a look on the Psychology Today website. It's got some really great information on all of this stuff, not just for dogs, but it sets you up for long life learning and the ability to be adaptable. So early training for our dogs does the same thing. It's not just about being able to do tricks. It's actually about being able to set them up for success down the line. Meaning if they're more adaptable, moving house isn't as big a deal. If you need to relocate and do crate training when the dog's like 8, 9 years old, it's not as big a deal because the dogs had that foundation of being adaptable and being able to learn things continuously. Now, I was wanting Jay to jump on for the next segment here, but I'm not sure if he's still with me.
I'm here, but my camera's just not working for some reason.
Okay, do you want to try and get it on again, or do you want to just do audio?
I think I'll just do audio. I'm
Okay,
not sure
cool.
what's wrong with this.
All right, okay, well, carry on, and people just need to deal with looking at me.
Okay, so the next segment is about the safety reasons that we do puppy training. So it's very important. There's a huge safety factor of it. When I had a point I wanted to bring up earlier, but because of this stupid camera, I completely lost my train of thought. Okay, so for safety reasons, the first one and the most obvious one that everybody should know is, of course, your recall training. So if you have very strong recall, your dog is a lot safer. You feel less stressed. I think everybody who's had a reactive dog or a dog who doesn't walk too well on leash or a dog who doesn't have great recall will understand this because it's happened before, sadly, and I think it will still happen again in the future. People who do not train recall with their dog or become too complacent with training their dogs have had fatal accidents occur. That is something that is very sad. It's really a tragedy for the dog. And okay, so in Singapore, it's different because there are leash laws in Singapore, right? But a lot of places around the world whereby they allow you to have your dogs off leash, you should have very good recall. If not for things like car accidents and stuff like that, you could also potentially save your dog from a traumatic experience with something else. Let's say your dog sees a chicken. This just happened yesterday. This was the point I wanted to make. There was a chicken, like just right around my estate, and then apparently that chicken just had some chicks, maybe like 4 or 5 of them. They were just walking along the park, and then Blue saw them. Blue wanted to go up and say hi, but of course the mother hen was not very comfortable with that. And I was not going to let Blue go near a mother hen who just gave birth to a few chicks. It is very dangerous. She could peck Blue's eyes out or something like that. So recall kicked in. I called her back, and the mother hen was starting to run towards Blue and started clucking and making all these noises to kind of like scare off Blue to say like, get away from my kids. Understandable. So recall was so important there, because if I did not have that recall, she probably would just go forward and someone was going to get hurt. I'm very sure that someone's going to get hurt. So think about your recall training and make sure you understand why we emphasize so much on recall training. It's a lot of it has to do with safety. Okay, second is boundaries. So training helps your puppies understand boundaries. So maybe not so much in Singapore, because I think even properties they have like fences and gates around here, so it's not so much of an issue. But actually, no, scratch that. Boundaries help your dog not door dash. Like the moment the gate opens, the moment the door opens, they don't just immediately run out and then go exploring and things like that. I'm talking about all sorts of places, whether you stay in an apartment, whether you stay in a landed property, whether you have gates around or not. So I have invisible boundaries with both Blue and Ori. Basically, when I want to bring it out for a walk, they have to be able to be calm when I open the gate, when I open the door. They don't dash out of it. And once I put on their leash, we can walk out and they can still not dash too far away. So you have to help your dog understand what are the boundaries, whether it's within your yard, or let's say you don't want your dog to get into your pantry. Most people don't want to, because you have all your food in there and then your dog will have a buffet. So teach your puppy how to understand boundaries from a very young age. It also reduces the risk of them getting into something that they shouldn't be getting into. Like maybe let's say your medicine cabinet. For some reason, your dog might have your dog might be able to reach and open up your medicine cabinet, pull out everything. Or for Blue and Ori, I have a small aquarium, a small tank at home, and I keep all of the tank stuff. I don't know what it's called. All of it below the tank in like a cabinet. So that's a boundary for them as well. I don't want them to go into there and start pulling out things and potentially eating something hazardous to them. And last but not least is impulse control. So impulse control is very important, because your dog doesn't know what is wait, basically. Your puppy wants everything. They see something new, they're like, oh, I want to go sniff that, I want to go explore that. So things like crossing a road. If you have to teach your kid how to cross a road, you look left and then look right and then look left again, or whatever it is, you should be able to teach your dog not to just cross a road. If your dog has good impulse control, they can stay with you before you cross your road. So this also applies to things like when you have guests over, or when your dog meets another dog or another animal in general. A lot of dogs would just run up to another dog. And what you hear all the time is, oh, don't worry about it, my dog's friendly. But that's not what we want. We want your dogs to be able to be calm when they meet each other. They show the right body language to each other before they want to engage in play. A proper introduction is very important. It's like what Fraser said earlier. You don't want people running up to you and just jumping up on you, hugging you, picking you up, carrying you, licking your face, and you expect that to be fine. No, dogs are supposed to be able to interact with each other calmly and then start to attempt to play, or invite to play. Yeah, that's the word, invite each other to play. Of course, Blue isn't the greatest at that. So I would say for initial introductions, she's more or less okay with it. She has a few close friends that I just let her run up to, honestly. But that's because they've known each other for so long, and they play with each other really well and stuff like that. But every introduction to a new dog, or to a relatively new dog that she's not met many times and frequently, I would always ask her to be calm. We walk up to the dog nicely, we say hi, we move away. If she can do that well, she can go back and interact with the dog. So there you go.
So one thing I do just want to add there is that even though places like Singapore have got the leash laws. Personally, I feel very strongly that it really doesn't matter if your dog's supposed to be on leash or not. That recall training is a requirement. Even if your dog is not going to be off leash, they should still be off leash trained, because you don't know if your dog's ever going to slip off the leash, if you're going to accidentally drop the leash, or if it snaps, or if they get spooked and somehow manage to get out of the house, or the dog park that you take them into has got a dodgy gate or a dodgy part of the fence. It's super important that the moment you need your dog to come back to you, you are able to do that. And unfortunately, there has been too many examples of people losing their dogs because they think to themselves, "So my dog will never run away. My dog loves me too much." And then they'll try to be a bit cheeky and like have their dog off leash because it's very quiet, or they'll accidentally drop the leash, or something's happened, and their dog will go, and the dog's gone, and they've lost the dog, and then there's all this panic and all this fear. I can't think of anything worse than one of my boys going missing. I mean, I'm very lucky. Within my whole life, I've never lost a dog. Like, I've never had a dog go missing. Obviously, unfortunately, I've lost dogs to the Rainbow Bridge, but that's different. And recall training, orientation training, boundary training, impulse control, all of this stuff that Jay just spoke about is how you stop that from going wrong. And it is just so important, One of the other things that I would add about safety as well is the basic commands. So we've got what we call the toolbox 10, and that's like sit, down, stay, come, heel, touch, go, leave it, bed, and relax on cue. And the reason I have those 10 is because if you've got those 10, that's basically your ability to communicate with your dog in a lot of ways. And it's not just for the safety of your dog, it's for the comfort of your dog and the safety and the comfort of everyone around your dog. And that leads me on to the next segment, which is the quality of life. Now, this is the one where people don't like to think about, because they think, oh, that's just the way my dog is. My dog is scared, they're skittish, that's just the way they are. I'm sorry to tell you, but fear is not a personality trait. It's just not. Yes, you can have certain dogs or people or other animals that are more susceptible to anxiety and fear, but it's not personality trait. If there's a dog that is anxious, if there's a dog that is nervous, if there's a dog that has a phobia or a fear, these are not personality traits. These are things that can be helped, whether that be human or dog. And I've had conversations with people about their phobias about this. They're, oh no, it's just the way I am. No, if you went to a psychologist and worked on that, you'd probably be able to help yourself and you'd lead a much happier life if you weren't terrified of dogs, for example. So we can't think that it's not personality trait for a human, but it is for a dog. The quality of life of your dog is dependent on partially training, socialization, and bonding. So stress reduction is a huge part of why we do this. Proper training, especially in the younger stages of a dog's development, reduces stress and anxiety. And this simply leads to happier and longer life. Now, there's an example that I've noted down here, and I'm actually going to change the name so that it's not somebody that can be recognized. So let's call this dog Spot. Now, Spot,
Wow, very original.
you say that, man, but I grew up on a farm that had Spot 1, Spot 2, Spot 3, and Spot 4. And I would love to think that Adam Mackey is listening to this and laughing his head off, but I just loved the fact that that was the dog's names. And one of our dogs was actually sired by Spot 2, I believe. And he was a brilliant little dog. Anyway, so this poor dog, Spot, who is a real example, but the name is made up, was a little mixed breed terrier. And yes, terriers can be susceptible to anxiety. Now, the owner thought along the lines of, oh, that's just the way the dog is, and did nothing for the dog's anxiety and stress. And the dog was scared of thunder. The dog was scared of traffic. The dog was scared of strangers. The dog was scared of other dogs. And anything you could think of, this dog was terrified of. And the dog lived till about 6 years old. And it wasn't an accident. It wasn't something that was like an incident. The dog ended up having a heart attack because of stress levels. Stress can kill humans, stress can kill animals as well. So, as harsh as this sounds, if you're not putting in the work to help your dog with their stress, with their anxiety, you're potentially shortening their life. Now, that might upset people when that's said, but we all know that stress can shorten our lives as humans. It's silly to think that it wouldn't happen with our dogs as well. So moving on from that, quite honestly, depressing part, enhancing the human-animal bond is just something that should be done. It makes the dogs happier. It makes them friendlier with everybody. And to be honest, there is no better feeling than having a dog that is truly bonded to you. And if you think you've got a great bond with your dog before you've started training, do that training and see the difference it makes, guys. I cannot stress enough how amazing that bond becomes. And anybody that's worked with us, that has put in the work, will attest to that fact, that the moment you start working with your dog and helping your dog through different situations, through their socialization, through their training, that mutual trust, that mutual respect and love grows to a point that you didn't even realize you could have with a dog. And it is just fantastic. And I will use my own dog as the example with this. I thought that I had a good bond with Athos when Athos was young. And I thought, oh, he's just reactive to other dogs. He's still a good boy. He doesn't like certain people, and he does get scared of them, and that's fine too. That's just the way he is. But then I tried to get trainers, and that didn't work, and I ended up having to go through the journey myself, which is why I ended up going back to university and coming down this track. But the difference between having Athos when he was kind of trained, and I thought, oh, me and this dog have got a really special bond, versus having done that training, is just chalk and cheese. It's not even the same thing. So I would totally say, not just for the quality of life of your dog, but for the quality of life of you, do the work. Make sure you're doing that early work with your dog, just so that you can experience such an amazing bond with your dog. The other thing it does is it simply improves their daily lives. It means that their routines are more enjoyable, like walking, feeding, even things like going to the vet or the groomer, where they're normally quite, nervous about that. Even a confident dog, if you put them into the vet and there's big syringes and the vet sticking for thermometers where the sun don't shine and things like that, even a confident dog's going to be like, whoa, this is a bit much for me. And that's okay. But if you've really put in that work and the dog is confident in you and the dog is more confident in themselves because of the work that you've put in, all of this becomes a lot more manageable. And for the things that aren't incredibly invasive, they'll actually enjoy them. You know, for the example of Porthos, my youngest, he actually enjoys going to the vet. He gets excited to go and see them when he's not in pain, obviously. Like the last time I took him, he twisted his hip jumping off a picnic bench in a dog park. A story for another time. But yeah, okay, he wasn't happy then, but he still wagged his tail when he saw the vet, even though he was in a lot of pain, you know, and that is part of the socialization. Now, social interaction opportunities. We're not just talking about the dog here. If you've not put in the work and your dog has got some behavioral issues, that's okay, as long as you're working on them. But if you manage to get to the stage where your puppy is well socialized, they are able to go more places. They can go to dog cafes, they can go to parks, you can take them along to your friend's house, you can take them along to the beach, and they're going to be happy just chilling out and just being with you, being part of that social situation. You know, I remember one of our clients, the dog's name's just escaped me. Doesn't matter, the example still stands. The dog used to be very anxious around people and in social situations, so we did a lot of appropriate socialization and counter conditioning. And then every time they had a barbecue, they were able to have their dog just to be in the barbecue area. And the place where they lived actually had like a fenced in area with the barbecue pit. So it meant that their dog could be off leash and just mingling with all the guests. And the dog was able to do that because the owner did the socialization. And it made such a difference to that dog's quality of life. Instead of being stuck upstairs in the empty apartment by themselves, they were able to be with their guardians, with their owners. And that just made a big difference to that particular dog's life. It means that you can take them on hikes and big long walks because you're not needing to worry about your dog becoming overly stressed from that stress bucket getting overly filled. So the quality of life is a huge factor of why we do this as well. Now, I know I spoke a little bit about it, but Jay, could you speak about the appropriate socialization as well?
Yep, sure thing. So socialization has a lot of people have this misconception about socialization. They feel like good socialization means that my dog should be able to play, to interact with anyone, human or animal, and be able to just engage in high energy play with them. But that's what we consider over socialized actually. Proper socialization is where a dog is comfortable and confident in whatever situation you put them in. Of course, nothing aversive. So if your dog is able to just meet a dog for the first time, just kind of chill, say hi, that is very good behavior. That is something that you want from your dog, as compared to a dog who just runs up to every single dog from 100 meters away. The moment they spot them, they just start running straight for that dog just to go say hi. But that is not very appropriate. So when you start socializing your dog, especially your puppy at a young age, what we always advise our clients to do is you only reward for the calm interactions. Let's say your dog goes to a new place for the first time, a cafe for the first time. You're not going to bring your dog to a cafe on his or her first time when it's the busiest that the cafe can be. You want to find a time whereby the cafe is not too busy. There's maybe one or two people around, maybe one or two dogs around, and it's not just bustling with it's not a full house basically. And then you start to reward your dog for being able to just lie down and chill, to be able to relax in that environment. Because a lot of people think that socialization only applies to your dog and another dog. No, socialization applies to the different situations and environments that you put your dog in as well, because you have to be able to introduce your dog to all these things. So the different types of socialization are, of course, people. So people of all ages, genders, and however they look, you have to be able to socialize them towards that. You slowly introduce them, and you reward them for being calm, and then they have a positive interaction. The next one is animals. So it's not just dogs. Of course, I'm not asking you to buy one of each animal just so that you can socialize your dog. No, but then if you have the opportunity, of course, dogs, cats, all the different types of pets. I would I would advise against turtles. I think you would agree with me on that one, Fraser. You don't really need to socialize your dog to the turtles because they would just probably nip your dog.
Well, the reason Jay's saying that is that we have some terrapins, effectively because they were gifted to us years and years ago. And after making it very clear that you shouldn't gift live animals to anyone, we still had these turtles, and we still have them today. They're now about 12 years old, so they're not exactly the smallest. But every single one of our dogs has been nipped by these turtles. It is both sad and actually a little bit funny. And the only one that didn't learn their lesson was Porthos. Athos and Aramis stay well clear of the pond, but Porthos, he will actually run to the pond if he hears the turtles making noise, and if they try to climb out of the pond, he knocks them back in. Which, to be honest, is quite useful because the turtles escaping from the pond is a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I will say, just because we're talking about other animals, is we're not just talking about other pets here. So, yeah, when you're working with dogs that are living in cities, most of the time you're talking about other pet animals. You're also talking about birds. You're also talking about pigeons, maybe seagulls, maybe monitor lizards if you're out here, maybe otters, things like that. These things, you want your dogs to have some kind of positive exposure to a diverse range of animals, because if you come across these animals and your dog is not familiar with them, it can be very stressful. Now, if you live where I grew up, for example, you're going to want to introduce your dog to horses, to cows, to sheep. Now, when I say introduce, I don't mean jump into the field and let your dog go straight up to the animal. That's a terrible plan, especially if you're in the UK, because farmers do have the legal right to shoot on sight. But you want to let them be exposed to the sight, the smell. If the animals come over to the fence, yes, your dog might be able to see them and get closer to them. But the idea is so they don't get overexcited by this. Do counter conditioning to animals such as deer. So, for example, my sister's dog, Doug, he's a brilliant dog. He really is. But he's super tall, super lanky, super fast. So they've been working on, he's still very young. So they've been working on every time he sees a deer, when he's on leash, they make sure that they have a very high value treat shoved in his mouth so that he is thinking, oh, every time I see a deer, I get something good from my humans. Because if he took off after that deer, I mean, as human beings, you're not going to catch him. He's too quick. The deer's too quick. I don't necessarily think he would know what to do if he ever caught it, but you don't want to be put in that situation. So by putting in that work and the socialization aspect of doing that counter conditioning, oh, you see that wild animal, make sure you give your dog some love and attention, maybe a treat, or even bring a toy out with you so that they see something like that. You can start playing a game with them. It makes a huge difference. And wherever you are in the world, you've got to actually make an intelligent decision on which animals are they likely to see and come across so that you're doing the proper socialization. Sorry, Jay, didn't mean to butt in there, but please carry on.
No, that is a very good point. So when we say let your dog be exposed and give them positive reinforcement for that, things like monitor lizards that Fraser mentioned. Do not let your dog go up to the monitor lizard and then give a treat to them. No, you stay at a safe distance and then you reward them for being calm. Okay, so please do not try to let your dog interact with every single animal they see. Okay, and next on the list is of course sounds. So depending on where you are, there are different types of noises that you might hear throughout the day. Your dog has to be able to hear them and not freak out, not get worried, not get overstimulated as well. So YouTube is great for this. You can literally just search whatever type of noise you want. So if you stay in a busy city like Singapore, so you search for traffic noises or street noises, and then you can play it on a very low volume, and then you can offer your dog rewards for. You might see their ears perk up, or they might turn in the direction of wherever the noise is coming from. And if they do not react in the form of like barking and things like that, you offer them a treat for that. And then you just increase the volume over time. Eventually, they start to feel like this is just another form of white noise. There's household noises as well. So things like your vacuum cleaner, your oven beeping, your microwave. One thing that I had to do recently, not recent, a couple months ago, was I had to counter condition the sound of popcorn popping for Ori, because every time she heard it, she started barking. So of course it's a new sound. You will never have everything covered, but if you do enough, new experiences that your dog encounters will not have such a negative impact because they've been exposed to a good range of different kind of stimuli. And of course, the fourth one, which a lot of people don't notice or don't do, is surfaces. There are different types of surfaces that your dog should be able to experience positively. So some dogs, grass. I do know dogs that do not like to walk on grass because they haven't been properly exposed to grass. Sand, if you're going to the beach, tiles, different types of tiles, and carpets as well. So think of the different types of surfaces that's around your environment, around your estate, where you normally walk your dogs. They have to be able to walk on them comfortably. And I'm not asking you to drag your dog across these surfaces. Please don't do that. You let them investigate, and if they were to try and take a step on it, you just calmly reward them. And that's all. And the last one is the one that I talked about a little while ago, was environments. So if you stay right in the middle of the CBD, your dog will not have enough exposure to places like beaches, forests, because all they have is a very busy city. So think of how you're going to socialize your dog to all these environments. You bring them to the beach for the first time. Do not spend 6 hours there. Keep it short. Do not overstimulate your dog. Let them have a good time and then go home. And then the next time you can just increase the duration. So you can bring your dog to the beach. You can bring your dog to the park. You can bring your dog to, I don't recommend this, but then run in the middle of the forest. I don't recommend it unless you have very good bond with your dog already, because the middle of the forest can be very stimulating to a lot of dogs. It's that natural environment, I would say. They thrive in there, but they might get overstimulated by places like that. And of course, staying in a very busy city, you have to think about the more urban areas as well. You can socialize your dog to cafes, to bars. I think both Fraser and myself have socialized our dogs to bars very, very well. If we walk past a bar, Blue and Ori gets very excited for it. What about your boys?
Yeah, my boys, they kind of expect to be able to chill out when they're at a bar. And I know that Barthos in particular, he expects to get some attention from the waitresses and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So these are all the types of socializations that you should be thinking of. Remember, it's not just other dogs. So if you do socialization well, your dog will have less fear, less anxiety, a more positive outlook to new experiences. They adapt a lot better. There's a lot more resilience in them. and they won't develop phobias or negative behaviors. So I didn't get Ori at 3 months old. I didn't get Blue at 3 months old. Blue was still in her puppy phase, so she was about 6, 7 months old when I got her. So I still did the socialization work then. Ori, I had to do a bit more of it. I'm still doing it, to be honest. I got her when she's 2. She's turning 5 this year. I still do socialization exercises with them. So very, very similar to what Fraser has as well. I will have a little squeaker in whenever I bring the girls out for a walk. And then if it's something new that we encounter, even though we've walked the same path for the past 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, I still be prepared. Even if you don't have the squeaker, you can record the sound on your phone, and that's what I do. So and then I just play it, and then Blue goes, "Oh, okay." So I know that that's a good thing. That's a nice thing to see. And then she calmly can just continue on to walk and things like that.
So just when we're talking about squeakers, you don't need to have anything massive. Okay? It's really quite simple. And yes, now I've obviously got Porthos's attention. But these are just tiny little Kong balls. And this ball is probably going to get destroyed now because my boy's all excited. But it doesn't need to be as annoying as this. It can be as simple as, and it's just an attention noise to get them a little bit excited so that then they get that endorphin rush. Now, if I do this, you'll see exactly what that looks like. You see that he's very, very happy. Nope. Well, you will if I can get the camera on him. But for those of you that are just listening, effectively the noise of the toy itself can get your dog excited. Now, you cannot be cruel. If you do that, you need to give them something. So I'm just going to give him a little bit of a scatter feed just to give him a bit of a reward for accepting that squeak without losing his head. Human requesting to see Porthos. My camera work probably wasn't very great there. But what I could probably get away with is Porthos. Come on, up. Here we go. Can you pop up there? Up, up. There we go. Now we go that. Give. Good boy. Okay, so I'm not going to play fetch continuously with him on live camera. Although, pretty sure if I did that in a live video, some people would probably watch it. But yeah, the kind of aspects of socialization, you've heard us talking about the primary reinforcers before: food, affection, play. Use all of these in the process of that socialization, and you'll get much better results. Because there are a lot of dogs that might be too anxious to accept food out on walks, but then they might really enjoy getting love from you, and that'll give them that same endorphin hit in their brain. So now we move on to the practicalities of doing this training. Now, of course, you can read up about all of this and you can do it yourself. You can follow online courses and they are very, very good. You can even just go on, there's like videos with like Zach George on YouTube that you can follow as well, and they're good as well. But the thing about training your puppy, I don't have anything now, my boy, sorry. The thing about training your puppy is that private lessons are very, very effective for anxieties and fears that need specifically looked at. But if you're wanting to have more socialization, if you're wanting to do more proofing of that training, so proofing is when you take the training from something you can do in your own home to something that actually works in real life. then group classes are really beneficial. So have a look in your area for good group classes that are structured, that aren't just saying, come to our puppy class and we'll do good stuff. No, make sure that they've given you a structure, you can see what they're actually going to be doing in each session. That's really important because it shows that you're actually going to be getting the ability to proof that training. It gives you more of a chance at a real life example, real world scenarios, and practicing those cues with distractions of other people, other dogs, new environments. We've got a dog at the moment who, in our current group class for puppies, and I know they won't mind me mentioning this, but Luca is super, super excitable. And in the first class, he was all over the place. He was just like, this is amazing. Everybody's around. Look at all of these dogs. Look at all these smells. Look at all this. And even just within the first 2 classes, he was able to start doing the things he could do at home so much better because of that exposure and having that guidance while you're in those real world scenarios. So that's a really good example of it working quite nicely. The socialization opportunities are also very, very good. Interactions with other puppies, other owners, it enhances the social skills. But also, a good group class will not just be in one room. They'll take you outside. They might have 1 or 2 sessions that are in a different location so that you can practice what you've learned in different scenarios. And that gives you more opportunity to socialize your dog with, as Jay was saying, different environments, different surfaces, different noises, different animals, different people doing different activities. You know, dogs may never have seen somebody on a skateboard, and that might scare them a bit. But if you get them to have that exposure in a group class with the support of their new puppy friends and yourself, and you've got the guidance of a good professional, it makes everything that much easier. The developmental benefits just are far, far greater than just trying to do it yourself. On top of that, just having the support of not just the professionals, but also of the community of puppy owners that are going through the same journey. We've got our group on Facebook, which we ask people to join. And you don't need to be clients to join this one. It's a private Facebook group. And if you've got questions about your dog, you want to share problems, and you want to get help and support from other owners, from trainers that you know you can trust, join this group, and we'll certainly be there to help you. We'll get that in the comments, and we'll also put it in the show notes as well. And of course, actually being taught how to use the tools that you're learning in a practical situation. Now, this is something that blows my mind. And not all puppy classes are created equal. Not all obedience classes are created equal. Not any class, whether it be human, dog, cat, whatever. Not everything is created equal. But learning training things, learning sit, down, stay, come, heel, anything that you've been learning, if you're not shown and taught and coached how to use these in practical situations, you have basically learned tricks, and they're not very much use in real life scenarios. So by going to a group, you're going to be able to learn how to think about using the tools that you've been given. You're going to be given the example to have supervised playtime with other dogs and other dogs' owners, while you've got professionals around that can advise you. Hey, maybe you want to make sure the leash is loose when you're introducing your dog to another dog. If that leash is tight, you're creating more pressure in the situation. Hey, maybe you want to read your own dog's body language there. Your dog's not overly happy with this situation. Give him some space. And things that you may not pick up straight away, and you may just need a little bit of guidance during that situation. And that, again, that's not just for puppies. We've got a class that we do every 3 weeks. We've got one this Saturday, actually, which is our guided walk. And the guided walks are great because it means that people, even if you've had your dog for years, you get to turn up. We go a nice, good, decent sized walk with the other dogs. And as you're walking, we have at least 2 trainers as well as assistants coming around and giving you advice on how to just tweak some of the things that you're doing to make the walk more successful for your dog, for you, and just to make things safer and more enjoyable. And sometimes just having that guidance can make a real difference, you know? So we've got many, many, many examples of dogs that have benefited from these situations. I just talked about Luca from the most recent batch. We've had other batches of puppies which have just done phenomenally with making sure that they've had that kind of training. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to put in that effort if you've been given the opportunity to do so. So with that said, I am going to speak about what we've got going on at the moment before we start answering some questions and opening the floor up to the live listeners. I see we do have one question sitting here right now, which is great. Anybody else watching, please ask questions. Even if you don't have a puppy and you're just curious, ask those questions so that we can give you some answers. Now, for people that are looking to get more information on puppy anything, really, puppy classes, we've got that on the website. Puppy articles, we've got a wealth of puppy articles on the website, which I've just posted in there. Our next run of our puppy training course starts on the 7th of July. Hermes has just fantastically posted that even before I got to it. So please take a look at that if that is something that you are interested in. So this is what we've got going on. Please take advantage of all of the articles, take advantage of the courses that we are running. Even if you've not got a puppy and you're looking to do more socialization, that's what the guided walks are for. That's what the obedience courses that will be getting run out later this month are for. And take your time to go through things and ask questions when you have a dog or a puppy and you've got any requirement for advice. That's the best thing you can do as a dog owner, is make sure that you're doing the right thing by asking people how to do it, asking people that know, asking professionals, asking people that are in the same situation as you, like in our Facebook group. Now, with that said, guys, we will do some questions now. Please reach out to us more. Please join us every Wednesday evening, Singapore time, 8 p.m. is when we start. We love to see you there. Let's get on to some questions. Jay, do you want to answer the question from Lou?
Yep. Okay, so he says that his 1-year-old will bark when he heard baby crying or some random noise. This happens when he's sleeping at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Okay, so the first thing is that I understand it can be annoying, you can get frustrated, but then you should not be shouting at your dog or telling your dog off for barking, because to them, they don't know what they're doing wrong. They hear a noise and then they just react to it in the form of barking. So the best way to tackle your issue is that you have to teach your dog that instead of barking, I want you to do something else. So it's like, okay, so for Blue and Ori, if someone's at the door, they will bark, but it's never excessive. So they'll do the bark once or twice and then they'll come and look for me. That's what I've taught them to do instead of just continuously barking at the door. So the way I did that is that you can simulate the whole experience for them. So in your case, they hear a baby crying, right? So you have to look once again on YouTube, look for sounds of babies crying, and play that at a low volume, and offer your dog some reward for not reacting to the noise. If they are reacting to the noise, even at the lowest volume that you found it at, that means that you need to make it even easier. So maybe you can play the sound on your phone, but then put your phone in another room. And then you play the sound. And then the moment the sound comes on, stick a piece of treat right in front of your dog and let them take that treat. And then you start to increase the volume of the noise, and then start to do more realistic situations, like instead of just the baby crying noises, you have random noises. So maybe knock on your table with your fist, just rap on the table once or twice, and then immediately offer a piece of treat. Or tap your foot on the ground on your floor, and then make an offer a treat. So these are all the random noises that you have to come up with, and then offer your dog something for not reacting. You say, what can I do at 2 a.m.? I'm half awake. I'm not asking you to do this at 2 a.m. You're supposed to do this as a training routine. So do it daily, do it for 5 or 10 minutes a day, and start working with your dog as soon as possible. Because if you leave this running on, it will just get worse and worse. This is speaking purely from experience. You can't just say that, oh, my dog is going to get over it, or oh, my dog's still a puppy. Eventually it gets better. It really doesn't. And leaving that to chance is very foolish. I would not recommend you to just let it be. The best thing that you can do right now is to plan a routine so that you can do it daily. 5 minutes of exercise once a day, or if you can spare more time, do it for 5 minutes, but then do it a few times throughout the day whenever you have the time. So just look up YouTube, find the noises that is triggering your dog, play it at a very low volume, and then offer your dog a reward for not reacting, for just noticing but not reacting.
So I actually just a little bit up. If you look up, I've put YouTube desensitization and socialization noises. That's a playlist of a lot of different noises that you can use. That's not all that's on YouTube, but that's just a playlist that I give people because it is quite comprehensive. It's got everything from dogs barking, door slamming, corridor noises, doorbells, you name it. So you can have a look at that and see if that helps. The other thing that you can have a look at is our article on dogs barking at the slightest noises. So you can take a look at that, as well as the great advice that Jay just gave there. Now, I'm going to approach this one that I just got sent to me on WhatsApp privately. I'm not entirely sure why. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, can I add on to help
Yes.
Lou? So to help you keep sane and not lose your mind, because I know it's 3 a.m., everybody's sleeping and stuff. If you don't mind having the noise in your background, I recommend playing like puppy, what do we call it? The kind of like white noise for puppy is classical music. It's relaxing noises, meditation noises for dogs. If that doesn't affect your sleep, it's quite peaceful, it's quite calming. You can play in the background. That actually helps block out some of the noise that your dog might hear outside and react to. So if you don't mind, and if it doesn't disrupt your sleep, you can keep that on, and it might help manage it a little bit better. But it won't solve the issue, but it helps manage it for the time being.
Now, the only dog calming music which I've seen that actually has been peer reviewed through an actual study is through a dog's ear. So I've just posted the link to that on YouTube. You can also find it on Spotify, on lots of different situations, but that one's fairly good. So you can have a look at that. I was going to play a little bit of it, but I'm not entirely sure what that is like with regards to licensing. So I'm not going to do that.
Wait, did you post it? Oh yeah, I just saw it. Okay.
I can post the link, but I don't think we can play it on the podcast. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be an issue on a live, but in the actual podcast, when it goes out onto Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I think that might be an issue.
That's true.
Lou, the other thing that you can do is some management. This depends on the setup of the house. But if the dog's barking at noises outside of the house, you can do things like noise dampening. So if you look at the print here, this is not actually just a print. This is actually noise panels. Now, obviously, I've got this here because it's good to absorb the noise of maybe my daughter playing Baby Shark at full volume, or dogs outside barking, or Porthos with a squeaky toy, maybe. Although you've been very well behaved this episode. So you can try things like this. There's also like noise dampening door draft blockers. It's probably not what they're called, but it's like noise reduction
basically.
and noise blocking hardware, if you like, for the house. Now, in our old apartment, I used to have that all the way around our front door, not really for dogs, more for me, because I grew up in a rural area and I'm not used to hearing a lot of noise. But it certainly works for dogs as well. So you can give that a shot as well. Just seeing the time there, but I will tackle this question. I was asked it was a double-barreled question that I was asked in WhatsApp privately. I don't know why they didn't really want to post it, but that's okay. And that was on house training, on having your dog to pee in the right place. Now, this one's a tough one. And it's one that gets people quite emotional because they don't like the dogs doing the business in the house. There's a couple of things that you've got to remember. The first thing being is that your dog is a puppy. They're a baby, right? Now, a lot of people are like, oh, we've had our dogs, we've been doing toilet training for 2 weeks now. Why is our dog not toilet trained yet? Guys, would you expect a baby human at 6 months, 8 months old to be toilet trained, to be house trained? No, you wouldn't. As a human being, a smarter animal than a dog? Yes, we're supposed to be. So I'm not saying that you need to wait the same length of time to house train a dog as you do a human being, but don't get your expectations so high that it's just going to be a case of snapping your fingers. Okay? Now, the basics of getting house training done properly is consistency. And it's one that is so underutilized. We're like, oh yeah, but I'm busy at work all the time. I can't take the dog down that often. Or, oh yeah, but we don't really want to have the pee pads there because, it's inconvenient. But then at the same time, they'll say things like, oh no, we can't do that. That's impossible. It won't work. Well, when you want something to work, you'll make sacrifices. You'll put in the effort. You'll not find excuses for the reasons that it doesn't work. And that annoys people to no end because they don't want to be told that they're making excuses. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what a lot of the time is happening. Now, if it's a genuine reason for that not working, there is other ways of doing it, and that's absolutely fine. But you cannot say it's not working if you've not tried it. Okay? Now, the quickest way of doing house training is the way that I've just posted in the chat there. Now, all of the articles that I've posted there are also on the set of puppy articles that I posted earlier, but this one specifically on house training, the one I posted above it, is about two species, two different expectations, and how we seem to put a lot more stress and a lot more expectations on our dogs than we do on our own children, on our own species, which is interesting. But For those of you that are struggling with house training, give that one a shot. That's not the only method. There's many other methods of doing this, but it's one that does work swiftly. So give that a try. But the biggest thing to remember is consistency and following the advice that you're given by the professionals and not finding a reason for them not to work. That's really the biggest thing I can say. And I'm not just saying that as a professional, I'm saying that as somebody who has dogs myself. I can find excuses for why my dogs do or do not do certain things. And we've just got to be honest with ourselves. And the thing is even as pros, we always will find things our dogs do differently from other people's dogs, and we may not be completely honest with ourselves. Jay will attest to that as well, which is why if I am having an issue, I will ask Jay, and if Jay is having an issue, he will ask me, so that we're not going in with these blinders that we get on when it comes to our dogs, or indeed our children as well. It happens with kids as well. So hopefully that one will help people with toilet training. The other one that I was asked in there by the same person was puppy biting. Now, puppy biting is very, very common, guys. Do not get too upset about it. It's just teething. They're uncomfortable. They want to bite. So you've just got to make sure that you're giving them enough opportunities to satiate and to satisfy that requirement to chew on things. It's a very, very natural behavior. Puppy proofing, cannot stress that enough. You will toddler or baby proof a house. If you're bringing a puppy into your house, I recommend you do the same, or you might end up losing furniture or your puppy getting hurt or whatever else. I will post the article on puppy biting as well, because I am very aware of the time. But big things to remember about puppy biting is do not allow your puppy to bite your hands or gnaw on your hands. It doesn't matter if it's not that painful for you. It can be painful for something else. If your puppy is doing it, roll your hand out of the puppy and ignore your puppy. If your puppy is insistent and is going for your ankles, is going for your hands and just not leaving you be, you leave the area, or you have your puppy go into an area where they do not have access to you. Do not scold the puppy. Do not give them into trouble. Do not get upset, because that's giving the dog attention, and that's exactly why they're doing it. That's what they want from you. So you basically remove yourself from this situation, stop giving them attention. When they calm down, give them that attention again, and they will learn fairly quickly. Posted that article in there as well. We don't have any more live questions at the moment. If anybody has any other questions, don't hesitate to ask them. Jay, before we wrap up, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
You brought up a very good point about even us as professionals, we still do seek advice from each other. So like I'm about to move places, move to a new apartment. So I'm already preparing in my head. I'll probably seek your advice on this as well. But like the current place that I'm staying at, we're the last unit on the floor. So it is quite peaceful, it's quite quiet. The place I'm looking at is a ground floor unit. So there's going to be a lot more movement, there's going to be a lot more foot traffic, a lot more noises. So I'm really like planning my schedule for the desensitization and counter conditioning work for both you and Ori there, that I will probably like ask you to have a look through it. So yeah, we go through the same thing that you guys go through as well.
What Jay's missing out there is one of the other reasons he's going to ask me to come round and review it is because he wants me to do DIY work on his house.
Yeah, that too.
Which is absolutely fine. You know, what's the point in having a country boy as a friend if you don't use him?
Exactly.
Okay, guys, we'll wrap things up there. Just as a heads up for what's coming up with us, we have got the walking classes that are active at the moment. So if you are in Singapore and you're needing help with your walking, we do have loose leash walking foundation classes that are coming up. We've got the next guided walk class this Saturday. So if you're interested, come and sign up to that one. We've got puppy classes, which are running at the moment, but the next one starts on the 7th of July. But if you are halfway through puppy training and you have specific things that you want to look at, you can have a look on the website and you can actually join individual classes. However, be aware that you will not have got the information from the previous classes. So it is better to do the full course. But indeed, if you want to have specific classes from the puppy course, you can do that as well. We are also opening up a grooming class. Now, this is not a class which is going to teach you how to completely groom your dog. It's about getting your dog to be comfortable, being handled, being groomed. And that starts this Sunday as well. And it's Jay that's going to be conducting that one, because I will say completely that Jay is the man for that job. I ask Jay's advice regularly when it comes to clipping nails, when it comes to grooming and things like that. He's fantastic from it. I'm not tooting his trumpet. I know if his camera was on, he'd be going a little bit red at the moment. But seriously, guys, take advantage of that, because there's no point in having somebody that is as good at that as Jay is and not taking advantage of it. We're also going to be opening up later on this month basic obedience and being able to brush up on basic obedience for your dogs. This class or course will be for adult dogs. So this will be for your dogs that you've probably done training before, or even if you haven't, so that you can come along and learn more and brush up on and learn how to use the tools that you already have. This class is something I think will be very sought after, because I get asked about this a lot. A lot of the time, people don't necessarily have behavioural problems to the point where they need to have one-to-one lessons. They just need a bit of a refresher on some of the basic commands with their dog, and that's what's going to be coming up later on this month. And maybe at the end of this month, beginning of next month, we are going to be doing fitness with your dog. This is not fitness for your dog, this is fitness with your dog. We are effectively going to be doing circuit training with your dog so that you and your dog can bond and exercise together with a group. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I've done this a few years ago with Athos when he was a younger dog, quite a few years ago now, actually, when I think about it, when he was in better shape, when I was in better shape. But by doing this, it will be very good, not just for us and myself, but for you guys. Just for the record, I'm not only qualified as a dog trainer and behavioural consultant. In a past life, I also did group PT classes and one-to-one PT in gyms and fitness centres. So it's not just going to be slapped together. I am going to be utilising those skills from past lives. And I think it's going to be something that's going to be a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for that one, and please join us, because I think that's going to be an absolute hoot. And keep an eye out for the online courses that are going to be released in the next month or so as well. That's what we've got coming up. Next week, our topic is a big one. This is going to be something that a lot of people need to listen to, a lot of people need advice on. If you are struggling with aggression, with reactivity in your dog, if your neighbor has an aggressive dog that you are having to handle every now and then or deal with, if you're working at a veterinary clinic and you're not entirely sure how to handle aggressive cases, aggressive dogs, if you're in a daycare and you're handling dogs and sometimes those dogs are reactive, slip through the net, or something happens that a dog has aggressive behavior. This is what we are talking about next week. Okay, so next week we are going to be doing the podcast on handling aggression in dogs. June the 12th, 8 p.m. Singapore time. Please join us and we will see you there. Thanks for joining us this week, guys, and we will talk to you next week. Have a good one. Cheers.